Kevin, you are responsible for saving some huge names, including Porsche. You were CEO of Porsche at 32 years old.
Well, I got that position because they were in such trouble.
And why were they in that trouble?
Because they didn't have a product strategy.
How did using the word club sport and what you did to the cars save the brand?
The press were killing us. German engineers, they went away and started re-engineering stuff. And we said, no, make it simpler than that. Let's start with a base of an engine, four wheels and a chassis. Let's take everything out. So we take the weight out. We dropped the car in suspension, plastic racing seats in it. We showed it at the British Motor Show. It was a commercial success because it changed the mindset of the press. So I bought Lamborghini GB as a company. It was broken. We fixed it by asking the customers, what do you actually want? And we created the Diablo SV. Porsche and Piech family owned the business at that point. They decided they needed a change. Myself and my finance colleague were invited in. I thought we were going in there to get fired. So we went in to talk to them.
What happened?
Well,
Kevin, you are a super entrepreneur responsible for saving some huge names, including Porsche. But you've also been at BMW. You founded your own businesses and done so many things over the years. It's hard to introduce a man that has done so much. So in your own words, who are you and what do you do?
In my own words, I'm a lad from up north. Grew up in a working class family, happy family. Studied engineering at university. Then I studied accountancy. I've been fortunate enough to work in some great companies, and including BMW, including Lamborghini, including Porsche, and that was all great fun. And at the age of 40, I decided I wanted to do my own thing. So I walked away and I started creating companies. And I've built 15, 16, 17 since then. Outside of that, I'm an outdoors guy. I used to play a lot of cricket. I played international cricket. Then I started mountain climbing, and I've climbed the biggest mountains in the world. I walked the North Pole twice because my son was too young the first time, so we went back together. I walked the South Pole. I've rowed and set a world record for rowing across the Atlantic. I've set 2 world records for rowing across the Pacific, one of which was being the oldest guy ever to do it. So not sure I'm proud of that one, but that's what I do for fun.
When you can do all of those things and have done all of those things and put your mind over to them, you need time. So it means to get all of those done, you had to start fairly early. And I think one of the most shocking headlines of your story was the fact that you were CEO of Porsche in Great Britain at 32 years old. Like, to so many people listening, that is a shocking statement. And you only got that position because you thought you were going to be sacked that day. And
well, I got that position because they were in such trouble. That was the reality.
And why were they in that trouble?
Because they didn't have a product strategy. I'd been in the business for 5 years and I'd watched it gradually, slowly fall apart. And I got more and more frustrated. And I had a very good, 2 or 3 very good colleagues who shared my frustration. And eventually the family, Porsche and Piech family, who owned the business at that point, they decided they needed a change and they cleared out the board. And myself and my finance colleague were invited in. And I thought we were going in there to get fired. They'd come over to England. They'd cleared out the British management. And then Armin and I got invited to go and talk to them. So we went in to talk to them. Before we went in, we'd already built a plan of what we would do with this company. And so we went in and we basically said, hang on a minute, you're giving us a hard time. We weren't running this business. We were the guys a level down who were actually doing the work. But you could fix this thing. So don't shout at us. You should be embarrassed because you're the big chiefs. And they said, what would you do? And so we stood there for 4 hours with flip charts explaining what we would do. We'd already been through this a dozen times before we went in that room, not practicing to make the presentation, but we were deciding what we would do with the company before they came in and cleared out the board. We didn't expect that to happen. And so they listened to the presentation. They asked us to leave the room. Armin and I went and sat outside. And 10 minutes later, they invited us back in and they said, we've made our decision. Right? I thought, right, I'm off. They said, no. You're the new managing director. You're the finance director. That's the plan. Make it happen. I want me. Okay. And I walked out thinking, what the heck just happened? And then we got to work. And we got our team together and we said, we've just been charged with this great brand. Are we really going to be the people behind the steering wheel of this amazing brand when it goes off the road? No, we're not. Right, then we've got to fix it. And we started making some big decisions. And, some of those decisions were really painful. I fired half the company, half. And I knew everyone there. They were my friends. I knew them. I knew their husbands, their wives. I knew their kids. I knew their dogs. It was the hardest thing you ever had to do. And I told somebody else this story and they said, bet you didn't feel as bad as they felt. I probably did, actually, because it was heartbreaking. But my job was to protect this brand, protect the company. Because if I hadn't made the decisions I made, the business would have fallen over. So we made the decisions we needed to make to slim the company down, reorganize, re-strategize, republicize, and off we went. And, the next 4 or 5 years, we took the business from last in the market, 32 brands, to first in the market. And that was our target, to become first in the market for customer satisfaction. And people said to me in the early days, how are you going to do that? I said, I have no idea. I have no idea. But what we're going to do is make sure we explore opportunities. We look at other companies. We talk to our clients. We get clients involved. We get the drivers involved. We ask them what's important to them. We get the dealers involved. I invited some of the dealers to come and sit on the board, and people said, you can't do that. They're dealers. No, they're an extension of our brand. They are the people who a driver talks to when a driver wants to buy a car. We don't do that. So we need to make sure we're all on the same page. And we just work together. I mean, it sounds simple, but we worked together. We built a plan of where we're going to go. And then we worked on that plan every hour of every day. And it was an 18-hour-a-day job for 5 years.
What gave you the fire and got you to that room to be able to do that growing up? Because if you come from a normal background with no kind of entrepreneurialism behind you, what made you that way? What was the thing that kicked you in that direction?
Yeah, well, there's no entrepreneur. My mum was the village hairdresser and my dad worked at the power station. Dad was a power station engineer. So no entrepreneurs in my family. I think I like a challenge, right? If you look at everything I've done in my life, I enjoy a challenge. And the harder, the better. And I heard a phrase, somebody said to me recently, don't ask Kev because he'll just say, hold my beer. And I thought, I had not heard, I know it's a common phrase, but I'd not heard it before. It just made me laugh because I'm just of that mindset that you say I can't do that, hold my beer. We're going to can go and do it, right? And so the drive was there because I was passionate about Porsche. I loved that business. I loved that brand. I felt myself to be so lucky to be working in that company for 5 years before it all went wrong. And then when they charged me with the responsibility, I was afraid of failure. It's imposter syndrome, isn't it? Your first fear is of, I'm going to cock this up. Well, I'm not. I'm going to work so hard. I'm going to give it my absolute everything. I had a great team of people around me. My right-hand man was my finance director, who was great, a German guy, fantastic. Armin Muller, fantastic guy. My left-hand man was a guy called Adrian Hallmark, who you might have heard of. Today Adrian's doing the job he's doing at Aston. Highly, highly competent guy. Just a great guy. And so we had a team of people who were passionate about this. And so you couldn't relax because they would push you. And if they relaxed, we would put, it was a team culture that we were going to do this thing.
Why were Porsche in trouble?
It was a lack of product strategy. They had the 4-cylinder cars, the 924 and the 944, and they gradually, after 20 odd years, they'd gradually run out of life. And the 911, the 928 had been on its last legs for some time before. We had the 911. That was it. And when the bulk of your volume, and thereby the bulk of your profit, was the 4-cylinder range, 924, 944, and those vehicles reach the end of their life, your revenue's gone. And you need revenue to drive the investment to build your new product strategy, and they'd lost sight of that. So it's poor management at global headquarter level.
One part of your story of how you turned that around was the word club sport.
Oh, yeah.
And it's funny because these days, if you add that word to the side of a Porsche, it adds value.
Yeah.
Yet you added that word and took away value at the time because you were taking thing off the car. How did using the word club sport and what you did to the cars save the brand?
The press were killing us. We'd got tired and flabby. Us, the product, everything. There was the accusation. we'd lost sight of what the customer wanted. And the four-cylinder, the 924, 944 was on its last legs. And then the 968 was launched. And the 968 was a gentle makeover of a 944. That's what it was. But the trouble with it was it came in at a price that was not attractive. 924 had been down at £20,000 mark, and the 968 came in at £36,000, which is a big leap. You've lost a lot of people in the middle, and TVR were out there. They were stealing our customers left and right. And we recognized that we needed a car sub 30,000. And we actually said we want it sub 29,000. And part of it was about tax. Part of it was about having a position in the market. So we said to the factory, guys, we need a car at under £29,000. And they said, well, we can't do that. I said, no, you're not listening. We need a car under £29,000 or we're dead. And so can you have a think about it, please? And German engineers being German engineers, they went away and started re-engineering stuff. And we said, no, make it simpler than that. And there were some concepts made of a 968 with faired-in headlights. And, the thing looked like a dog's bollocks, but it wasn't going to help us with the price positioning. So we had an internal meeting in Porsche GB and we said, right, how could we do this? What could we do? And we said, let's take everything out of the car. Let's start with a base of an engine, four wheels and a chassis. Let's take everything out and then put a few bits and bobs back in. And that's what we did. We took everything that we could out of the car. So it takes the weight down, put a few bits and bobs back in. Well, you've got to be careful what you put back in because nobody wants to drive the cheap Porsche. So you've got to reposition the car. And Porsche had this classic nomenclature of the club sport. We said, right, well, we'll grab that. What does that mean? So we take the weight out, we drop the car in suspension, then change the suspension, which dropped it, an inch. We color-coded the wheels, got the least expensive wheels we could find, color-coded the wheels. We put plastic racing seats in it, no rear seats, no nothing, everything out. And the car was a dream because of the same engine, the same power. It was lower, it handled better. It was lighter, it handled better. We put a really nice steering wheel in it because you get in, the first thing you feel is the steering wheel. Oh, that's lovely. And we said, right, there it is. We can do that at under £29,000. We said to the dealers, guys, in those days, they used to have 15, 16% margin. Guys, your margin on this is 9%. Our margin on this is tiny. It's a positioning. It's a marketing strategy. And the dealers were great. They said, yeah, okay. So we produced it in yellow, red, white, black, or blue. 5 colours. Wheels colour-coded. We showed it at the British Motor Show. And we slapped a decal on the side, or as Americans keep telling me, it's decal. A decal on the side. 4 feet long and a foot high, Club Sport. And we stuck it on the Motor Show stand and the crowd went wild. Wow, we want one of those. And the thing started to sell. The orders started to come in and come in and come in and come in. Now, we only ever sold, I don't know what the number is, 300 or something of them. But that wasn't the point. The point was people wanted this car. It was lower cost than anything else we had. It handled like a dream. It drove like a dream. And it looked sexy. And so we delivered the cars. And then we had phone calls from the dealers saying, where's the decal? What do you mean? They said, well, we want the decal on the side. What, you want Club Sport written on the side that big? Absolutely. So we had a guy, Steve Vaughan, in a van. Out you go, Stevie. Go and put decals on all these cars. And that's what we did. We went around the country sticking Club Sport on the side of the car. And the journalists loved it because it was, back to the roots of Porsche. The dealers loved it because it was something new to talk about. The customers loved it because it was cheap, and it was cheap. 30 grand is not cheap, but it was inexpensive comparatively, and it was a dream to drive. And they rocked up at the golf club. Don't forget, 95% of our customers then were 98% were male, so they'd rock up at the golf club in their yellow Club Sport, and people would go, whoa, and it was great because you get golf clubs in the back of it. It's a perfect car, but it changed the perception. And that was the beauty of it. Somebody said to me, it can't have been a commercial success. Well, it was a commercial success, even though it only sold 300 cars or whatever the number was. It was a commercial success because it changed the mindset of the press. They were suddenly talking about Porsche having a future again instead of just having a past. And Autocar gave it Car of the Year, which I blew my socks off. There's a journalist, a great journalist called Steve Cropley, who I used to meet now and then. And Steve said, "Can I come out and have lunch with you?" Or can I don't think he was so forward. "Can I come out and meet you?" "Yeah, come on, Steve, come out to head office, sit down, let's have lunch." Just like this, chit chat. He said, "Oh, I have something to show you." And he got out of his bag a mock-up of the page that announces the Autocar Car of the Year. And it was a 1968 Club Sport. He could have knocked me over with a feather. I mean, seriously. It was a 25-year-old car. But it was a dream to drive. And it just changed. It started the change from Porsche was a brand that was in trouble to Porsche was a brand that was thinking about the future again. So that car was just axial to that shift.
For me, being an automotive lover of many big brands, Lamborghini, Porsche, Ferrari, Aston Martin, McLaren, been very lucky to own a lightweight hardcore from most of those brands, which would have started with something like the Club Sport.
Yep.
Porsche is a legends brand for my generation because time has passed since those cars and so many more cars have come that have added to the legendary status, and cars like that have got older and become legends in their own right. We've had the Carrera GT, we've had the launch of Cayennes that everybody sees on the road daily. The Panamera went down a treat with a whole different audience. Porsche has built itself up to give it this legendary unicorn status of a brand. But now I kind of look at them and think, are they in trouble? Taycans everywhere, not selling, huge cost. Every Macan on the road now, you can only buy an electric one. There's Chinese EVs everywhere. Do you think these brands are going to need saving? Do you think this is the most trouble Porsche has ever been in since that day you turned it around?
I think that Porsche has been absorbed into the Volkswagen Group. And with that, come opportunities and come challenges. The opportunities are you've got a massive balance sheet behind you. The challenges are you'll be encouraged to use group components at every level. Everything from engines through to switchgear will be somewhere group components. And I think the beauty of a brand like, and Ferrari, Ferrari is also part of a big group, but they've managed to just stay aside. A danger, but they're much smaller volume than Porsche. Right? And
they've probably made a big mistake recently, which we'll get onto.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting, that's one of those, really cars, isn't it? But the point with Porsche is I think it's just got to be careful it doesn't lose its brand identity. And its brand identity is to be distinct and different. And it's quality, heritage, engineering, and design. Those are the four values that we used to speak about. And I think the Macan, I drive a Macan, right? You've just driven in past it. My day-to-day motorway basher is a Macan, and I love it. It's not electric, but to bring in your probably the highest volume car they have these days as electric only, I think is a massive strategic mistake. I really do. 50% of the market is still wishing to stay with internal combustion engines. So why would you cut yourself off from that audience?
Well, Porsche was 10% down last year on global deliveries of all cars, which is an enormous number. Like I've heard you talk about the fact that you were only targeted to increase BMW by 4% years ago, which is an enormous number in the company that size. So to be 10% down on sales is absolutely enormous.
Huge.
Is it?
And now they're running a skunkworks back office project to put an internal combustion engine in the new Macan because they have to. But it's just, whoever decided that in the first place, that's bonkers.
But you talk a lot in your story about being down on the shop floor, seeing people in factories, in manufacturing plants, asking them why that forklift goes through that hole and going in to knock down.
You really have been watching my stuff, haven't you?
If you've got that kind of mindset of talk to the actual person on the floor, talk to the actual customer, what are Porsche missing? Because someone like me thinking, it's tough for those companies because of the rules that they're governed by. They have to make all these cars electric. Do they actually have to?
No.
Or are they making some very silly decisions?
I think they are too early in making that decision. You know what? 20 years from now, your children, my grandchildren, may well not be allowed to buy an internal combustion engine car. We don't know, that rule keeps changing. And they may want to drive an electric car, but at the minute, that audience isn't there. There are some people want electric vehicles, and good luck to them. And you should provide that option. But for a brand like Porsche, which is built on petrol engines and performance and noise and people don't buy a Porsche for transport. Yeah, you want to transport, buy Golf. It's a fantastic car. Go buy Golf. It'll do everything you want all day, every day, forever. You don't buy a Porsche because you want transport. You buy a Porsche because you want experience. And part of that experience for a lot of people is still lifting the bonnet or the boot, and which model you're buying, and looking at that engine and smelling that engine and driving it and hearing it grumble and groan and rumble. That's part of the sensory experience of driving this thing for a lot of people. Now, I'm not arguing that the world won't move towards electric vehicles. I mean, I saw a report the other day about, I think it was the Luce who said, and the report said it's got an engine on each wheel. Yeah, well, congratulations. Professor Porsche did that in 1908 or something. The first Porsche was the Lohner Porsche with 4 electric motors, 1 on each wheel. So what goes around comes around. The point is, for me, you've got to be careful not to cut off half or more of your audience by focusing only on one product option. That product option, the Macan, has been electric. I think that's a mistake. And if I was still at Porsche, I would have been screaming from the rooftops that that's a mistake.
Many of you might not know this, but away from the recordings that I do in my van studios, I've actually got a digital marketing agency. Now, we specialise in a lot of automotive clients, but we cover everything really. Our team is made up of PPC specialists, SEO specialists, and the most talented designers I've ever seen, which have done work like the Starnagloss website, the TWR website, and many more. We've actually just built Icon Box for the Auto Alex crew as well, meaning that people that watch their channel can buy their favourite merch seamlessly and in style. So if you're interested in starting a project and you'd love to speak to us, just tap the link below and let's hop on a call. We've seen so many enormous mistakes. I actually thought when Jaguar did their rebrand a couple of years ago, it was potentially one of the most amazing marketing stunts about to happen in history, because I was convinced that a week later there was going to be a video released of a load of Jaguars coming out and sort of destroying the woke movement and taking back the brand. And I thought they was like, oh my God, they're geniuses. I can see what they're doing. And it never came. This moment never came. And their customers, their audience, the people that had spent tens of thousands of pounds on these machines over the years, cut a spot in the timeline and said, well, I'm a Jaguar fan until there.
Yeah.
And I'm no longer a Jaguar fan. We keep seeing companies like Ferrari, who've clearly, to me, just bought the Apple car, not just designed it with Apple, they've just bought the one that was designed. Companies like Jaguar making enormous mistakes. Companies like Porsche rewinding their own mistakes and launching ICE combustion engines again. What happens as someone that's been a CEO of some of these brands? What is going on inside those walls that the people in those companies just aren't listening to the audience that are buying the product? Where is the disconnect?
I was in South Africa recently, and I met a guy who imports Porsche in South Africa, Toby. And I know Toby, and I hadn't seen him for a few years. And it's 20 years or more since we worked together. And he said, Kev, there's one thing I need to say to you. I said, what? He said, I need to say thank you. I said, Toby, thank you for what? And he said, thank you for the right-hand drive Porsche Turbo, 911 Turbo. And I said, right, why are you thanking me for that? He said, because you were the only one who physically stood up in a meeting and shouted and banged the desk and said, you have to build it. There's a factory, we're only going to build left-hand drive, right? Because right-hand drive market, for 911 Turbo, I don't know, 300 a year? I don't know, I'm making numbers up. But it was tiny, 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 so they weren't going to do it. And I stood up and I literally banged the desk and said, you have to do this. This is a brand issue. Now, you've got to fight hard in a major corporation. And if Porsche goes into Volkswagen, it becomes a major, major, major corporation. You've got to fight hard to get the customer's voice there. And some people keep saying the same thing. Some people want to drive electric car. Good luck to them. I don't. I personally will never drive electric car. I have no interest. Other people, like me, are saying, I want a nice car. That's what I want. I want it to rumble and groan and fill it up with petrol, and it takes me 2 minutes and I drive off. That's what I want. And I should have that choice. And people can say, yeah, but Kev, you need to think about the green credentials. Well, let's be careful when we start quoting green credentials around electric vehicles, because they ain't that green. They're not. By the time you've built those batteries and built those cars and done everything, there are various reports that say the car comes with 50,000 miles of emissions built into it before you start. So let's not get into that argument. So for me, I actually like an ICE car. An ICE car, not a nice car. I like nice cars, but I like an ICE. I like a petrol car. Actually, I've got a diesel. I've got a twin turbo Audi Allroad in the garage there. What a machine. I drove it this week for the first time in weeks. What a machine. It's done 120,000 miles. It's like a rocket ship. It's got such torque. Wow, man, it's fantastic. So I enjoy that. And people say, yeah, you'll get that from electric. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But at my age, I don't need to go electric. I don't want to go electric. But there are other people like me. So unless the government bans them altogether, but then again, I'm old enough to remember when the government thought diesel was the best thing since sliced bread. And so they changed the tax system so that they promoted diesel, and then they changed their mind subsequently. So I don't believe the government anyway. As a car manufacturer, you've got to look to the future. But if you're a niche manufacturer, a Porsche, a Ferrari, an Aston Martin, an XYZ, then you've got to have one eye on what your customers actually want. And they don't all want an electric car.
They don't also want smaller engines constantly. I was at an event this weekend where Lamborghini were heavily pushing the Temario, which is their brand new Huracan replacement with a V6, and it sounds crap. And like, no matter what they did, it sounds crap. And they were coming out at 400 grand with options.
Wow.
And I feel like Ferrari with the 296, which is like a V6 hybrid, many of their customers that bought lots of cars started to give these things a go. And they're like, hang on a minute, before you all batter it, 'cause it's a V6 hybrid, we're the customers, we actually quite like it. It's quick, it's this, it's that, because they're so passionate about the brand.
Mm-hmm.
But they still had 458 Speciales, they still had F40s in their collection. It provided them something different to the Ferrari buyer, the normal Ferrari buyer that has a multiple Ferraris. It provided something different. But I feel like right now we've pushed it so far that even that buyer is going, well, hang on a minute, like what the hell is that? Yeah. 600 grand a Luce. The Temario, people are going, I'd rather just go and spend 120 grand on a Huracan, which are all now going to 150, 160 because they're worth more money because nobody wants the Temario. Yeah. It's like, my point is getting back to what are the mistakes the brands are making to think they can get away with this? Like, is there someone, you've talked about the fact that you were given these big glass offices over the years, but you went down to on the boots and the ground floors and spoke to the customers that were behind the gates in the weekend. Are brands becoming so big that they're totally disconnected and they think they can just tell the audience what they want versus what they actually want?
I think that's part of it, but I think there's also the fact that the brands are looking to the future. So the big manufacturers, a transition from internal combustion to EV for the whole of the Volkswagen Group is such a massive, massive transition. Every factory in the world becomes obsolete. The cost is astronomical. It is staggering. And so you've got that pull, which is legislation driven. And then you've got the smaller pull, which is a customer saying, we don't actually want to go there. And somewhere you've got to find that sweet point, which is satisfying your customer. And, the argument will be that tomorrow with a smaller engine and higher revs and this and that and the other, it'll be less emissions, it'll be this, that and the other. But the customer says, I don't care. I actually don't care. I like the fact. So I bought Lamborghini GB as a company. And it was broken. And it's when I was at Porsche and we wanted another revenue stream. So we went out, we bought Lamborghini GB, paid a few $100,000 for it, right? And then we fixed it. And we fixed it by meeting the customers. We fixed it by talking to the customers. We fixed it by asking the customers, apart from a decent service and a decent parts supply, what do you actually want? And we created the Diablo SV, so the lightweight Diablo. And that was again done, my team in Reading. We sat down and we had that conversation. And it was a club sport strategy all over again. We stripped cost out of it. We stripped weight out of it. We made it hairy and people loved it and it sold. And I used to occasionally take one home And I lived on an estate. And in the morning, it wasn't the most reliable car in the world. It wasn't. But in the morning, I'd go out and I'd fire it up. Boom, 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 boom. And my neighbours used to come out and look. And I said, I'm sorry if I'm upsetting you. They said, no, we just love the sound. They used to come out and listen to it. Because it would sit there for 5 minutes till I was ready to leave. It was always a bit embarrassing if it was dark because you put the headlights on and one had come up. And then the other had come up. And if you got two up, then it was a good day, But it's an experience. You're not buying a car. Lamborghinis are terrible as cars. I mean, you want to go shopping, don't ever take a Lambo. It's dreadful. But you want to go and enjoy an amazing road or go on a circuit. It's an experience. So that's what you're buying. You're buying the experience. And it was incredible as an experience. But manufacturers have got to make sure they keep sight of the customers who want that special car, who want that experience.
So what are the people that currently are in charge of Porsche GB or Lamborghini GB and all these people? What are they getting wrong? Because new cars aren't selling. McLaren apparently aren't replacing the Artura, which was 570 sold brilliantly. Loads of models, they had their reliability problems, but loads of V8s flew out. Then they replaced it with the Artura V6. I think we can get away with this. They've sold next to none, like horrendous. Apparently they're not even making a lightweight hardcore version of it, because nobody wanted the original version of it anyway, so who's going to actually buy it? But for me, it just brings the question of it must just be governments that are making them do this, or is it them that is getting this wrong and they could still get away with putting a V8 in it or a V10 in it?
It's all about return on investment, isn't it? All of these decisions now are it's become corporatized. It's too corporate. It's just too corporate. And the corporates have to report to the public markets, and they have to meet all of the standards that are set by the governments, and emission standards, and this standard, and that standard, and the other standard. And it just makes it dull. It just neutralizes the passion and the excitement of the premium brands we're speaking about. All the brands that we're speaking about now, the models you're using to describe, nobody needs one of those. We choose to buy one of those because we want that experience, and we're fortunate enough to be in a position where we can afford to enjoy that experience. I don't want to do that in a Luce. I have no interest in a Luce. What do I want a Luce for?
Your friend you mentioned is Aston Martin.
Yeah.
Aston, for me, did one of the best things ever when they released a car. My friend Mark McCann's got one in his collection. It's called the Signet. And it was like the car that I think was positioned towards the wife or the partner of someone that had an Aston Martin, a DB9 or a DBS. And they then released the Signet. And it was a rebranded Toyota IQ that they bought in bulk. A load of these things, put Aston badges on it, as subs. It weirdly looked like an Aston in some ways. But no one really hated it, because I think everybody got it, that they were trying to make enough models that were fuel efficient of this completely different things that they could keep making big V12.
Yeah, it was so that in aggregate they met the emission standards.
I've not really seen any of the other big brands necessarily do that in the last few years. They just seem to be thumping along, numbing down their current models and range. Do you think we're going to lose before 2030, 2032? One of the really big car brands, Porsche, Lamborghini, McLaren. Do you think we're going to lose one with the direction they're going?
I don't think we may lose them as an independent company, like Porsche. Porsche was an independent company. It's now part of Volkswagen. I think the Ferrari is part of the Fiat group. They get absorbed into these big groups, and the danger then is that they become neutralized. They become neutered by the considerations of the big corporate. So the brands themselves are so valuable that I can't see us losing. Aston Martin, fantastic. I have an Aston Martin, it's one in the garage. Beautiful car, wonderful car. I love to drive it. I think I'm pulling up Adrian here. They've got a great CEO in Aid, but the cost of running that business will be extreme. And they need investors who believe in the future. Even if the shareholders of that business decided they couldn't continue independently and they sold themselves into a big group, you wouldn't lose the brand name because it's so valuable. Aston Martin as a brand, the James Bond car is just so valuable. But I sincerely hope that won't happen. I really do. And I think they're going through some very interesting ideas with product strategy at the moment from what I read, that they're walking a smart path. And I hope that with aid at the wheel, they'll achieve their results.
So if you were running one of those big brands today, Porsche, Lamborghini, the big threat, especially with someone like Porsche, is China is coming. Is that what you would see as the biggest threat?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I mean, they've got almost bottomless pits of money. The governments are investing, the Chinese government are investing in these firms, which means that their R&D is huge. Their ability to produce new cars is rapid. The speed at which they produce cars is incredible. So it's a shift. But the competition's been around forever. And what you have to do is recognize them and then respond. You have to respond.
Is the only thing that separates an electric Macan from an electric JQ the fact that it has a Porsche badge on it?
No.
Which is in the same way that there's a Louis Vuitton handbag, because people struggle to get their head around electric motors. With an ICE engine, you can understand V6, V8, V10, V12, where I don't think people understand different electric motors in cars. What separates an electric Macan from an electric JQ?
Well, I haven't driven either, but I believe that if I were to go and take those two cars and evaluate them, would find that the Macan is far more capable, but also the quality of the build, the integrity of the product, the quality of the materials used, the long-term sustainability of that car, I would expect it to be a lot better. That's what I would expect, the Porsche to be a lot better.
What would you be trying to do to compete with those guys and to gain a strategic advantage?
I'd be using the brand positioning. I think, I watched Le Mans the weekend, and you see who won Le Mans. It was Toyota again. And that's not good for Porsche. Porsche have to be there in sports car racing and have to win. So I would be focusing very heavily on my public positioning, and that revolves around brand positioning, which revolves around racing and integrity and design, all the things I spoke about previously. But you've got to keep promoting the quality of your brand. People will invest in the brand as long as they believe in the brand. And the product has to support that. And the phrase I used at Porsche when we were running it was, we've got to be world-class at every point. Wherever you touch my brand, you have to get a world-class experience. So whether that's a product or the service or the telephone or the finance or parts supply or whatever, world-class, because that's what you're buying into. If you want to charge a premium price, you have to have a premium experience.
Take us inside a corporate giant like a Porsche.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think people in those businesses, maybe even businesses like BMW, etc., have a safety bubble around them that they think everything's fine because we're so big, we're so huge? But in reality, when you lose 10% of your sales, that can bugger up absolutely everything. From experience in being inside those businesses, is that what the culture can be like?
I think in a very big company, it absolutely can be like that. And that comes down to leadership. And something I'm passionate about is making sure that leadership is able to communicate the real values of the business.
Sorry, I don't know what...
That was my fault.
Sorry.
So to me, that comes down to leadership. And that's where leaders have to be able to communicate right through the whole organization what it is that we stand for here. And you can't allow the company to become isolationist. When I went to BMW, it was a bit isolationist. It was a bit of a bubble. And, you've heard me say it before. I walked in and they gave me a plan that was grow at 4%. Here you go, Kev. Here's the plan. Grow this business at 4% because that's what we plan to do. I said, is that it? They said, well, we love what you did at Porsche, but that was all a bit bumpy, wasn't it? So it wasn't bumpy. We just changed a lot of shit that needed changing. It wasn't bumpy. There was a plan, and we went from last to first in the market based upon a plan. And at BMW, they gave me this 4% growth plan, and they said, there you go, we want you to deliver that. And I looked at it, I thought, well, that's dull, because look outside the window, guys. Lexus, Audi, Jaguar at the time, all these people are all coming from my customers. BMW customers were enthusiasts, and all those other brands wanted my customers. So I sat with my new leadership team and said, we've got to do something different. And, they kind of looked at me and said, really? We're doing all right here, Kev. We're all right. Yeah, you're all right, but you're not great. And you need to be great. If you're going to continue to grow and develop, you need to be great. And there was one guy in particular who said, you're mad. I'm out of here. And he was very, very senior. He was the next guy to me in the ranking. And he said, you're mad. You'll spoil it. I'm out of here. And I said, okay, well, I'm sorry to hear that, but let me help you. And he left. And actually, once we engaged the team and spoke to the team, the people who are out in the market, the people who are talking to dealers, the people who are meeting customers recognize where we were failing to fulfill, where we were missing opportunities. Because it's not about looking for market share. If you're going to build a business, it's not about just looking for market share. Everyone's chasing market share. It's about looking for opportunity share. And that's a different thing. So you need to look where others are not looking. You need to imagine where others are not imagining. And so what we did at BMW was, over a process of weeks and months, I got the leadership team, and I remember the biggest workshop was probably 100 people in the room, and said, we're going to go to the next level. How are we going to get there? And once you get people starting to buy in and dreaming with you and imagining, the ideas flow. And so we very much pulled ourselves back to listening to the market, to listening to the dealers, to understanding what the frustrations were that we'd spent a lot of our time dealing with admin shit instead of getting on running the business. So we cut out a lot of the noise, and we shared a very clear plan with the audience. And I remember one particular instance. My first dealer convention was in Barcelona, Hotel Arts Barcelona. Remember it like it was yesterday. And I had to do the big keynote from the stage. Now, these days I'm a keynote speaker. I speak all over the world. But then I wasn't. It was all pretty new to me. I joined BMW at the age of 37, so I was still a young guy. And I thought, I'm going to do this differently. And I said to the production company, we're not telling anybody, but this is what I'm going to do. And they said, we don't know how to deal with that. I said, you get a follow spot and you follow me. This is how I'm going to do it. Because prior to that, it had been big corporate speak from the lectern, right? And everyone holds onto the lectern as if their life depends on it. And they talk to the audience from an auto cue. And I said, I'm not doing that. I said, I'm going to speak from notes, but I'm going to remember the notes. And we can have some notes around, but I'm going to do it differently. Okay, this is what we decided. So I've got 1,000 people in the audience. This is the dealers and some of their leaders and their wives, because their wives, many of the, well, so, to be fair, some of the business were owned by ladies. So 1,000 people, and they were used to being spoken at. And so I started from the stage, and then I just walked out in the audience. And you've never seen 1,000 people jump back so quickly in your whole life. Everyone kind of took a metaphorical step backwards. And I said, we're in this together. So not me on stage and you are here. We're all in this together. So I went out and I stood in the audience and I walked around the audience and I spoke. And it was a way of saying we're in this together. And then what I did was it changed the mindset. It started the mindset shift, and we grew that business. Instead of growing at 4%, we grew that business by 80% over 4 years. People say to me after, how the hell did you do that? It's very straightforward. We just focused on the right things. We just made sure we knew what the priorities were, and then we ruthlessly executed on those priorities. Get rid of the noise. I haven't got time for the noise. Let's do these things. And it transformed the business.
There's a story at Porsche that you were in. I think it was on a Sunday or a day off, and there was nobody else there.
Easter.
And a couple wanted to buy a car, and you sold it to them some way, somehow. You got this car done. No matter what the problems were, couldn't take pay, and do this, you got this car sold. Taking that mindset, and I'll let you tell the story in a second, but where does that mindset come from? That walk out into the crowd, everything? Because if you've not got, and you've not grown up with necessarily parents that have their own businesses or are managing directors or CEOs or a granddad or someone around you that's like that, what made you the guy that walks into the audience with the microphone, not the guy that felt the bollocks on stage to stand there and look at the audience?
Because I've come from a humble background where my dad, bless him, always taught me You need to be able to speak up and speak down. You need to be able to speak to people. And he was a power station engineer. I said that at the beginning. And he got promoted through the ranks till he was the boss of the power station. But everybody, I used to go and work in there in some holidays, in the days when you could go and get a job for 6 weeks, And I used to go in there and I was a labourer, sweep the floor, paint the wall, whatever it was. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was a working environment. And you're in there, the rough and the tumble. They don't give a shit who your dad is. They don't care, which is great. But they always say, your dad, great guy, your dad. And I'd say, why? Because he just talks to us. He's just talks to us, does his job, but he talks to us. And I learned from my dad that you've got to be part of a team. Even if you think you're on your own, you're part of a team. I did a speech at a conference in Chicago last Wednesday. Big audience, big stage, big light show. Whoa, huge. I walk on that stage alone. But for an hour before, I'd gone backstage because there's 20 people behind those curtains running all the AV, making sure I don't look like a muppet. And there's another sound desk out at the front, and then there's the lights operator and the camera operator. I just walk around and say hello to everybody. Hello, how are you? Nice. I'm Kevin. Yeah, I'll be up on stage. Yeah, nice. And I'm not doing it at a superficial level. I'm doing it because for me, it's comfort that when I'm on that stage, I got 30 people around me protecting me, right? So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, if they realize I'm not a complete tosser, they're more likely to help me. That's not cynical, but we're in this together. And that's how I feel about business. We're in this together. And I passionately believe that if I get off my backside from there's BMW, my 4th floor swanky office, and walk out through my auntie office, I had an auntie office with 2 PAs in, and go off and wander around the building and say to people, hi, I'm Kevin. Once they get over the shock in the first 3 months of, blimey, the CEO came out and spoke to us, then you really find out what's going on in your business. Because people will tell you. If you listen, people will tell you. They'll tell you what's going on in there. They know better than I do. Because they're day to day, they're picking parts. The parts warehouse. I'd walk in there and the guys would say, we're having a good month this month. And they don't see the numbers. They just know because they know how many parts they're picking. They feel it. Yeah, good month this month. A bit quiet last month, but a good month this month. So involving the team, engaging the team, you're part of a team. I don't care what it says on your door. I don't care it says CEO. It doesn't matter. You're part of the team. So get over yourself. If you're enjoying listening to me and Ben chat about the world and business and cars and life and everything, please subscribe to his podcast because that helps everybody. And if you want to help other people, go and have a look at Smarter Britain or kevingaskell.com and follow me and help me to help the next generation of young entrepreneurs.
So how did you become, at 27, operations director at Porsche, to give you the chance of that moment where they chose you to be managing director at 32?
Yeah.
How did you put yourself in a position of seniority at that kind of age that can give yourself the chance to go on to do that?
Well, I don't think I had a spotlight on me at 27. I joined the company to do the role of regional manager, teaching the dealers how to run a business, which sounds all very grand. But I got a degree in engineering and I'd got a qualification in accountancy at night school because I wanted to learn how businesses operated. And then I was interviewed and I was offered the role at Porsche. And my job was to go out in the market and help businesses to improve, help the dealers to improve. Because they'd had life very easy up until then. The brand had been amazing and, they were taking orders they weren't selling and it was all very, very comfortable. And it was getting more difficult. And I think it was the dealers who first saw that I was the cook who would dig in with them. I remember once having a meeting with a guy in Newcastle on Tyne and I was trying to explain to him issues around his management of his business. And at 5 o'clock, it was Friday afternoon, at 5 o'clock, he said, well, I have to leave now. I said, why? I said, we're still doing, I finish at 5. I said, well, I don't. I've got a bit of a drive home yet. And he said, where do you live? I said, Cardiff. He said, well, you're driving from here to Cardiff. I said, yeah, I'm driving from here to Cardiff once we finish this meeting. So let's finish this meeting. And the dealers could see that you were passionate about it and you were prepared to put the effort in. I wasn't ducking off at 2 o'clock on a Friday because I had a five-hour drive home. I would leave when I would leave. And I would get home when I get home. And so people see you don't set out to be recognized, but I can spot the people who work for me who put in the hours. I can spot the people for me who make a difference, who want to make a difference. And those are the people you start to rely upon. You start to give more responsibility to, and you'll give them the slightly bigger pay rise. You'll promote them. You'll give them the opportunities because they're the people you're relying upon.
But getting a board of directors and shareholders to trust a young person, especially back then, because I think when most people picture boards at big companies and things like that, they probably picture the whole board probably having an average age of about 57 plus.
Yeah.
So how did you get dealers and principals, for anybody young and enthusiastic and feels that like they've got it now to be able to do it like you did at a young age? How did you get those people to actually respect you and give you that chance and not just bat you off because they were 20 years older?
Well, partly by doing what I said, which is working twice as hard as anybody else. Well, that's not fair, working twice as hard as some people. Partly by showing a lot of respect to seniors. There were dealers. I invited some of the dealers to come and join my board. And people tell me, you're mad. They're dealers. No, hang on. They are the people who deal with the drivers of the car. And they have been running dealerships, some of them for 30 years. I need to harvest their experience. So I invited them to come and join the board. And they were fantastic. I can mention names now. I remember Peter Lovett, who, the principal in the Swindon area, and I remember Peter giving me a roasting at times. I love him to bits. He was fantastic. But sometimes he'd say, Kev, you're wrong, mate, and here's why you're wrong. And don't ever do that again because it looks like this. And I took those lessons on board. And you listen to these people because they've got 30 years of hard-earned experience that I don't have. So don't be arrogant. Don't be a dick. Invite people who know what they're doing to come talk to you and learn from them. So for me, it was a case of growing up very quickly, but not being afraid to ask for help. I think the reason that part of the reason I got the opportunity to work at BMW was because when I'd worked out what I was going to do with Porsche, I called the chief exec of BMW GB, a guy called Tom Purvis, great guy. And I knew Tom through the industry. And I said, Tom, I need to fix this business. We're not really competitive. I'm going to make some big calls here. Can I come and talk to you? And he was great. He said, yeah, come and talk to me. And we booked an hour. We probably sat there for 3. And he was fantastic. He coached me. I mean, Tom's, 20 years older than me, whatever he is. But he coached me and he gave me advice and support. And he said, right, now go and do it. And so the way that I've learned to grow is by not being afraid to put my hand up and say, excuse me, help. Somebody help me here. I don't know all the answers. And that's why when I said we want to go, it was actually Adrian Hallmark who said, when I said, where do we need to take this business? He said, we need to be number 1, Kev. This is a Porsche. We need to be number 1, Kev. And it was Adrian who said that. I said, yeah, great. How are we going to get there? No chuffing idea how we're going to get there, but that's where we're going. Right now, let's work it out.
But you're still at mercy of the parent company, the VW Group, for argument's sake, in Germany. How would you, like when you did the club sport model and that was you guys that come up with the concept, the idea, and they had to go and put it in motion. How hard was it to get a brand like that to do what you wanted?
Well, Toby saying to me 20 years later, Kev, you were the only one who physically stood up in the meeting and physically banged the desk and said, no, you have to do this because that is our position in the market. You have to, and you have to fight for it. You really have to fight for it. And to be fair to Porsche AG and BMW AG, they used to push back, but nobody ever threatened me. Nobody ever if people think, well, if I stand up, I'll get fired. No, you won't. No, you won't get fired. Not if you do it sensibly and with passion and with honesty. There's only one version of the truth, so be truthful. And so I've learned that you can find yourself in a position in a major corporate where you're dealing with people who've never been at the front end. They've never spoken to a driver. They've never had to sell a car. They've never been there. So I look at it the other way around. I'm helping them. I'm giving them feedback to help them make better decisions. And that's why I get so frustrated. The Porsche Macan EV only, that's just frustrating. Just frustrating.
Does that tell you there's no one in that room right now to bang their fist?
it tells me somebody's not banging it enough, that's for sure.
Is that the business that you would love to help and save the most now?
You know what? I carry Porsche in my heart. Absolutely. I've never bought a 911. No, because I never needed to. I was fortunate. I worked there for many years. I could drive anyone I wanted. I now drive a Macan day to day. But here am I as an old man still with an ambition. One day I'm going to have a 911. So it's still the car that I aspire to. I read the report on the GT3, whatever they call it, the road-going GT3, the Touring, is that what they call it? Right. The GT3 Touring. I read the report on that the other day. I thought, oh, there's a proper car. And I still get excited about it. So yeah, listen, if Porsche ever said, would you come and work with us come and do 6 months with us, I'd love to. I'm not going back as an executive. I'm too old for that. But if they said, come and spend 6 months with us while we work out our product strategy and our distribution strategy, I'd love to do that.
People, especially in different roles, always quickly find a way to, oh no, we can't today because of that, but if you come back then, or we can't do that now because of that, but if you come back then, or we're closing in X, we can't do that, or we're not in on Sunday. There's always a reason why not. What happened on Easter Sunday all those years ago?
So it was a year or two into my into my tenure as CEO. And we were busy. We had a lot of stuff to do. It was a big fight to get that business to where it needed to be in long hours, long hours. And it was Easter weekend. I went into work. Nobody else around, nice and peaceful, nice and quiet, get a lot done. And we had security because we had cars held there. We had security. Dave and his dog. They had a beautiful sheepdog and lovely dog. Anyway, so Dave just called me, and I was in the office, and he said, Kev, I know you're in, because he's got cameras, you can see. He said, I know you're in. He said, we've got a couple of people here looking through the fence, trying to look at some cars. He said, so I just wandered over and talked to them, and they're interested in buying a car. What do I do? I said, I'll bring him in, Dave. Bring him in. So you walked them into a building with all the lights switched off, right? It's a dark building, only lights in my office. And they came in, and there was a young man and his wife in their mid-30s, and they had decided they wanted to buy a Porsche, and this was their day out, and it being Easter, we were closed, and they were disappointed. They'd driven from somewhere. And I said, well, sit down, let's have a chat. I'll make you a cup of tea. So we had a cup of tea and a chat, and I said, what is it you're interested in? And they explained what they're interested in. I said, well, let's go and find one. So we went off, and we showed them around the workshop. We're a massive workshop, right? Huge workshop. So I showed them around the workshop, and I showed them bits and bobs and whatever I showed them. I can't remember now, but I did a tour of the building, and I showed them the car that they wanted. And I said, well, I can't get it out because everywhere's locked up, but you can sit in it, you can try it. And what happened was I said, right, we'll get somebody to call you on Tuesday, whenever the dealer opened. Somebody called them on Tuesday, and they bought a car over the next week. Right? It wasn't on the day. But what happened was on that week, somebody phoned me up and they said, how did you fix that then? Fix what? Well, you are letter of the week. Autocar used to have a letter of the week, right? Customer letter of the week. A reader letter of the week. And they said, you are letter of the week in Autocar. And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. Generally not a clue. And this couple had written this lovely letter to say, we went to Porsche GB, CEO unbelievably invited us in, made us a cup of tea, we had a chat, he showed us around, we bought a car. Wow, that's customer service. And that was it. That was the story. And it never occurred to me not to. Look, you run your own company. If a customer comes to you on a Sunday and you're just about to do something else, but you'd still talk to them, wouldn't you? Because that's how business works. I've come back tomorrow. Oh, bugger off. I won't come back tomorrow, mate. I'm here now. And so it never occurred to me not to speak to them. And it just comes back to the same old thing. I'm one of a team. I'm just one of a team.
Do you think teams were easier to put together back in the day when everybody claimed, before people claim that they've got this or X or Y?
I think there's a lot of noise made around reasons for people not to perform, not to do this, not to do that. And I'm cynical about some of it, I'll be honest. I don't like virtual offices. I don't. I'm I'm a dinosaur. I like people to be together. And the reason I like people to be together is because that's how we create. That's how we share ideas. That's how we learn from each other. And the people I feel sorry for with this, remote working are actually the younger people, because if you're in a business, you join a business, the way you learn in that business is by watching what's going on, by speaking to people who've been doing it for 20 years, is by the lunchtime conversation, is by the chatter around a coffee machine. That's all part of the way that you absorb experience, you absorb the culture of the business. So no, I'm not great on virtual working. I frankly don't believe in it.
If there's a young person now that's in a managerial position and they're wondering how to be a managing director of a CEO of the big company that they're involved with, what is something unconventional that they should be looking to do to make enough noise to give themselves that chance?
Yeah, that's very straightforward. They should get a copy of my book, Inspired Leadership. I'm not being funny. They should or listen to me speak or call me. Actually, don't call me. Too many call me at the minute. But they should build a plan for their area. I show people how to build a 1,000-day plan to go from position X to position 1. And they should build a plan which focuses on the priorities, on the real actions that need to be taken to drive that unit forward. And they'll start to see their performance, their team's performance improve. And so this conference I was at in Chicago the other day, it was great. And I had lots of people grab me afterwards and ask me questions. But I get the same question again and again and again, which is, I'd love to do what you say, Kev, but my boss won't let me. And my response is, well, ignore him or ignore her. Just ignore them. Because once you start to show improvement in your performance, productivity, target achievement, financial performance, whatever it is, they ain't going to argue. And it's not about shoving something in people's face. It's about saying, I can do this. I can drive it. And that's all I've ever done. The unit I'm responsible for, I make sure it's the best I can possibly make it.
Talk to me about the man that come to pinch you from Porsche and what he did to the rest.
Yeah. Henner Heitman. So I told you I'd gone to Tom at BMW and asked him for help. And Tom was fantastic and he'd given me help and advice. And then I met Tom through various industry meetings. We used to have an SMMT meeting once a month, whatever it was, once a quarter, I can't remember now. And Tom was the chairman of the subcommittee, and I have huge respect for the guy. He was great. And we just stayed in touch. And then Tom left BMW GP. He was going on to a new role within the BMW group. And I had arranged to have lunch with him, just as a catch-up, just him and I. And it was announced he was leaving. So I called him and I said, congratulations on the new role. I'm sure you won't want to do lunch now. So no, Kev, no, made a commitment. We'll have lunch and I'll see you on Tuesday, whatever it was. So we had lunch together and we talked about the world and his wife and his new job, and that was great. And he said to me, he said, part of my responsibility is to find a successor. And he said, I think you might qualify as somebody to be on a shortlist. Would you be interested? And I remember exactly what I said to him. I said, Tom, if you told me the interview was in Munich, BMW headquarters, if you told me the interview was in Munich and I had to walk there, I'd ask you for 10 minutes to change my shoes. Does that tell you? Okay, great. Off Tom went, and I heard nothing more for weeks and weeks. And then one day, late one afternoon, so my phone rang and it was Liz on reception. And she said, Kev, I've got a gentleman from BMW here to meet you. Oh, he's gone. I don't know where he's gone. He's just walked off. So I said, okay, Liz, don't worry about it. The phone down, thinking, gone to the gents or wherever he's gone. And I was up 2 flights of stairs and then through 2 glass doors, past my secretaries and this guy opened the door and just walked in, closed the door and sat down. And he said, hi, Kev, my name's Henner Heitman. And I've been told that we should appoint you to the role of, no, I've been told I should talk to you about joining us at BMW. It was like, sat down and we talked, and that was it. So I had an informal interview with him there and then, one afternoon, and thanked him for his time, and he left. And then the official lines opened and BMW HR got involved, and I got shipped out to Germany. I never did an interview in the UK except in my own Porsche office. I got shipped out to Germany and I went to the four-cylinder building, which for those who don't know is a very tall building, which is the home of BMW. It's 4 spheres. That's why it's called a four-cylinder. It's four spheres. Not spheres, tubes, cylinders, 4 cylinders. And I went in and I started having interviews and they lasted all day. And it was an hour with him and then an hour with him and then an hour with her and then an hour with him. And every time I got in the lift and I went up and I thought, well, as long as this lift keeps going up, that must be a good sign. And I was there just all day. And then the last person was Ben Pischer's and I was shown into Ben's suite, which is top floor. And it's so big that you couldn't see because it's a cylinder. And his office went round the cylinder, so he was somewhere round. But I knew he was there because he's a big cigar smoker and his huge wafts of cigar smoke were coming out. And he came out. He was lovely. Oh, Kevin, I'm told I should appoint you to run BMW GB. I said, well, I'm very pleased to hear that. Thank you very much. I would be delighted to do so. And he was lovely. And he said, do you have any questions? And I said, well, not really. I said, I've asked questions all day. I said, but I do have one question for you. And he said, what's that? And I don't know if you were aware, but when they were developing the McLaren F1 BMW engine, and Bernd had gone out in one of the prototype vehicles and taken it out for a run, and he'd lost it on the motorway and parked it in the trees. Big smash. I think he had his wife in. Big smash. And I said to him, well, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what happened in the F1? And he just laughed. And then we talked about it. And he said, well, it was a prototype car and there was a balance issue on the front and rear brakes. He said, and I braked and the back wheels locked and off I went. And we talked about that. And then he said, great, have you on board? I'll see you at the first meeting. End of story.
So even though you've reached the top building at BMW to talk to the top guy and then you come back and get the top role in the UK, were you still feeling unfulfilled as a person after all those years?
Do you know what? I don't really ever feel unfulfilled because I don't ever look backwards. It's a weird thing, and please take this in the way I'm trying to say it, but I did something recently where I had to write out my achievements. I was invited to apply for a role, a very, very big role it wasn't a corporate, it was an association, doesn't matter. And I had to write down my achievements, and I wrote down all these things I'd done. And actually I sat there for a minute, I thought, it's quite an interesting list, actually. That's quite an interesting list. I'd never looked at it like that. I'd never considered it like that. And it was all the work stuff, and it was all the other stuff outside work, and the adventures and this, that, and the other. So I don't feel unfulfilled, but what I feel, look, I'm 66. I'm looking at 70, but I've just entered myself into a 300-mile road race in September because, well, why not? Oh, sorry, cycling road race. Sorry, not car. Cycling road race in September. Oh, why the hell not? So I never look back. I just look at what's the next challenge. We did the 2 rows over the last few years. They were huge challenges. And now that I've done all the adventures of poles and mountains and rowing oceans and stuff, I'm kind of scratching my head a bit about what's next on that. But I don't feel unfulfilled. I just look for the next challenge. I just look for the next opportunity to test myself. The trouble is my body isn't the same body I had when I was 32. When I was 32, I could go and run 10 miles and not notice it. Can't do that these days. So certain things have to change, but otherwise I'm still, and I do ask myself, at what point, Kev, are you going to slow down? At what point? And I haven't found an answer for that yet.
So what was your hardest day since you were 32, or hardest period of something that nearly slowed you down, something that nearly made you stop? What was the biggest peak you overcame?
Ooh. So I've got a couple. Some in adventure land. Since 32, rowing the Pacific last year was so hard. And by day 20, we're rowing 24/7. We never stopped rowing. There's a team of 5 in the boat, and we set out to break the world record for the fastest row across the Pacific. So it's not an insignificant feat we were attempting here. And I know that by day 20, I'd gone bonkers. I was hallucinating. I was all over the place. So physically, that's the hardest thing I've ever done. And if I hadn't had a great team around me, it could have ended quite differently. But we all had bad days, but I had the worst days. You can't row an ocean at that pace when you're 65. Well, I did, but I don't know how the hell I did it, but I did. So that physically was that one. I think mentally and commercially, I got involved with a technology company 9 years ago. And I was asked by some investors to go and work in this business, have a look at it, because they could see it was all going a bit squirrely. They weren't happy with it. Kev, would you go and have a look? And these guys knew me. So they said, can you just go have a look at this for us? And I went in and I thought, we can fix this. I can see what the issues are. And I said, yeah, I'll stick around for a while. And kind of by osmosis, I became chairman of the company, almost by just, you put your finger in, your hand goes in, you put your hand in, your elbow goes in. And I ended up as chairman of this business. And then I found out that the problems were a lot deeper than I expected. And that just became a nightmare of handling certain inappropriate activities that got on in the business and handling taxman who has no compassion at all and just wants to shut the business down. People would have all lost their money. People would have all lost their jobs. And that one was very, very challenging. But I've had a few like that. A few businesses where you go in and you end up driving a turnaround. And it's hard work. It's 12, 14, 16-hour days grinding your way through grinding your way through to reaching a set of priorities and bringing the team with you. I took on a boat company. I don't know how long ago, 12, 14 years ago, something. And I actually went there as CEO. My wife thought I'd gone nuts because I moved. I went and bought a house there. I was determined I was going to fix this thing. And again, it was like Porsche, but it had more difficulties. And that one nearly killed me. But we took it from, well, not nearly killed me is an overstatement. It was just such hard work because the problems were massive. But we took that business from 10 years of losses back into profit in 14 months. I don't think I've ever worked so hard as I did in those 14 months. And I was living there on my own, so I was working all hours God's ends, grab 5 or 6 hours a night sleep and then get back in and get on. But it was great because the team was so proud of the business before it got into trouble, and they were so proud again because we were back into self-sustained mode and sales had dramatically improved and. But it was all about the team. It was all about changing the mindset of the team and changing the way we operated and changing some of the leaders, truthfully. But they were hard days. And, building a business, anyone who ever says it's easy, well, I've never found one that's easy. All I've ever found are long days, short nights, and hard work.
Who really inspires you?
So my dad, I would say, my dad died last year. And, I had a very good life and he had a very good death. He died very peacefully, having just chatted to somebody about golf. He was still playing golf twice a week. He's 89 years old, still playing golf twice a week. And he sat down, folded his arms, died. And you know what put me down for that? He inspired me because he had a set of principles, honesty, transparency, openness. And that's why the people at the power station he worked with had such high respect for him, because he's just a good man. So my dad inspired me. I've met various people in business over the years who I have learned from. Dieter Laxey, Tom Purvis, guy at Porsche who sadly died a short while ago, who impressed me so much I can't remember his name. It'll come to me in a minute. But there are people who I have watched through, they've always been one or two steps ahead of me, and I've learned from them. And I don't even know if they knew I was learning from them, but I would talk to them, I'd ask them questions, and they were very generous with their time. So people like that inspire me. I have a friend, a buddy who I've walked to the polls with, Alan Chambers, MBE. He inspires me. Pete Goss is single-handed round the world sailor. He built the world's biggest catamaran and it failed. It collapsed on its first mission. It was going to be the fastest. They're going to race it around the world. Amazing. And Pete's an amazing guy, and he inspired me. So I'm fortunate. I've met people who think, wow.
You're now on a mission to inspire young people. What have you just built?
So we just built a platform we call Smarter Britain. And that comes about because, if you look at in the world of work at the minute, there are a lot of people who are unemployed, some difficulties out there and challenges, and Alan Milburn's just produced his report, and. But I speak at schools and I speak at universities, and I meet young people who want to go and build their own business, but they don't know how. So I thought, right, well, I'll help you. So we created Smarter Britain, and it's free, it's open to anybody. You can go in, you register yourself, bring your idea, and we will help you to turn that into a business, and we'll take you through every step. We'll give you all the support you need, and ultimately down the track, we'll put you in touch with a mentor, and then further down the track, if you need it, we'll offer your business to a panel of potential investors if you want it. And it's not. The idea is, my target is to create 1,000 new businesses in 1,000 days. That's my target. And people say, "I'm crazy, can't do that." I say, "No, we can do that, actually. It's only 1,000. Only 1,000. And I've already been involved with an organization in South Africa where we've done that. And it was helping other people to create the same platform. And that's now trained 20,000 entrepreneurs. So I know we can do it, but it's the next generation of British entrepreneurs. And this country needs entrepreneurs. We need people in the middle. And I don't care whether it's the simplest business, a bucket and a ladder and a wash ladder and go and wash windows, or whether it's, the next Elon Musk. I don't care. Somewhere there's a position for everybody, and I just want to help them get that business going, be successful.
Well, Kevin, I think that you've helped many people today with sharing some of your absolutely incredible stories and experiences on this podcast. I want to thank you so much for your time on Road to Success. I'm sure we'll meet up again in the future.
Thanks very much. Been a pleasure.